Footnotes of History, the podcast that sifts through the subclauses and margins of the past to find some interesting nuggets that are long forgotten, with, of course, myself and, as always, the person I think of as the Minister Plenipotentiary of this podcast, Tim Philpott.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, thank you, Tim. What are we talking about today?
Today,
is one of your favourites.
Well, it is one of my favourite sort of topics because it's a sort of economic topic. But when I was trying to explain exactly what I was doing to people at work who asked, it seemed particularly dry. So we're going to do our best to make it seem, well, to bring it to life essentially. Because I think it had wide-ranging effects. Mm-hmm. Sorry, it's on the Cobden Chevalier Treaty. I should probably have said that at the start. But
I can hear listeners racing to the off button, but please hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
As Tim says, we will make this interesting.
Yeah, it is the mother of all free trade treaties.
Nice.
Signed in 1860.
January, I believe.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed, exactly. Yeah, between Britain and France. Britain. I think we should give a bit of context. I think to the situation. Is that
yes? Yeah. I think this is now moving into the later part of the 1800s.
Yeah,
I think
this is actually we should point out this is actually our first episode into this. No, well, not our first. I mean, it's not like we don't. It's not like we don't know anything about this period, but basically we focused quite a lot on the early 19th century until now. But I personally see the late 19th century as more like what I would call the high 19th century, the high Victorian period, where actually things started to look a little bit more like, I mean, not exactly like they are now. Obviously, there was no television or freezers or anything like this, but people started becoming consumers rather than just subjects of the crown. Mm-hmm. Essentially. Things start, civilization started changing essentially. Yeah, for Britain at least. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's give you a bit of context then.
Yeah, so we're in the late 1800s.
Yeah,
late 1800s.
Well, mid-late
1800s.
Yeah,
and I think from if we look at a foreign policy, foreign affairs type of angle, I think most the effort at this point from the great powers is to try and stop another Napoleonic-esque war. So at the end of the Napoleon War in 1815, great powers, as they did after World War I at Versailles, they basically divided up Europe and attempted to shackle the country they beat, which was France, in what they called the Congress of Vienna. So certain borders were redrawn, often quite badly, and this would have later impacts almost around this period we're talking about now.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time there is suspicion among the great powers, but also a real desire not to actually have another big continental war.
Yeah.
I think in the run-up to this treaty, that kind of shapes a lot of the affairs going into it.
Do you think that was on behalf of all of the powers, or was it more? Because I was under the impression that Britain was the main. It was the one. Britain was the one who was like, we've got to. This is classic. The classically referred to as the balance of power.
Yeah.
Basically, keep any foreign power that looks like it's getting too powerful in check.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're coming up to the 1860 signing of this treaty. Originally it was only sort of started talking about in 1859. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah. So it's not like this went on for ages. It was a very quick thing. But in only 5 or 6 years earlier, France and Britain were allies in the Crimean War against Russia. Mm-hmm. So that was we sort of bash Russia down, keep them quiet.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, France is now actually getting slightly more powerful than we thought.
Yeah, I think it's that I think the French becoming more powerful is definitely a major driver in some MPs and British people's minds at this point, because I think one of the most sort of dangerous periods between Britain and France coming into this time was directly before the treaty. You had what was now called the Austro-Sardinian War, which is where at the Congress of Vienna, Austria had basically been given a lot of land south of the Alps, so what we now would see as northern Italy.
Yeah.
And then in Italy at the time, there was a big movement towards Italian nationalism, getting our land back, having our own rule rather than this foreign power taking over. And France saw an opportunity to basically flex its muscles, I'd say, show that it was coming back into the world as a great power.
Yeah.
And so it allied with Sardinia and the Italian rebels in this point to basically force the Austrians out. The British under the Prime Minister was Palmerston at the time. I don't think they had any sort of mutual sort of love of Austria. Palmerston in particular wasn't particularly keen on the fact that Austria had this land south.
Yeah, I think they were quite sympathetic to Italian independence.
Yeah, but I think with the back of their mind they were still trying to keep this.
Yeah,
balance of power going.
But,
so that was the dichotomy they found themselves in.
That was the ulterior motive for this.
They didn't particularly like Austria having it, but they felt they needed it there because that was the deal that had been struck. And also, kind of, if France helps, they might get more powerful as a result.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you get a lot of this time in Parliament and throughout the country, a lot of anti-French rhetoric coming in. You get a lot of people getting very worried about the south coast and how the armory should be rebuilt and the arsenal should be restocked. Basically, you get some amusing asides from MPs saying that the French Navy's been built up, we need to have our own navy rebuilt, and then MPs coming back to them saying, well, we seem to have flipped our view on the Royal Navy because although the French Navy is only half as powerful as the British, we're saying we need more ships. So in Napoleon times we were saying one British ship's worth 10 French ships. We're now saying now saying the exact opposite. And this sort of rolls on until.
But this is really interesting because, as I said, they were allies in 1856, and this obviously almost flipped over very quickly from we beaten Russia. Who's next? Like France is saying, who's next? Almost. Who's next? Or Britain's. By the sounds of it, it's more like Britain's paranoia. It's like, okay, who's going to be next?
But I think also one of the other people we have to remember in this is Napoleon III.
Absolutely.
So I think so Napoleon III he's a nephew of.
I think so. The nephew.
I think
the nephew of the original Napoleon. Who famously was elected president in 1848 or the year of revolutions. 48. And he was elected basically because it was a universal, voting rights were given to everybody, including all the peasants who were illiterate. And historians genuinely believe that because they saw the word Napoleon on the ballot paper, they elected him. Which is like, that's the This is why in this period Bismarck is quite keen on universal voting as well, or call it universal suffrage or whatever you want to call it. But because it generally results in peasants who are very vulnerable to
being misled.
Being and electing very conservative people.
Interesting fact about that. He was the first elected president of France, and also the youngest until Macron was elected.
That's really interesting. That's really
fun fact about him.
Yeah.
Not sure how many there are about him. I mean, they've got the two. But
Is Macron going to crown himself emperor in 3 years then?
I don't know. Well, we can get worried if he invites the Pope round. And then
absolutely. So France is actually on its second empire at this point. By 1860.
I think it's also worth pointing out that after Napoleon III served his first term as president, he found out that he wasn't allowed a second term, and that's why he launched a coup.
That was why. Okay.
And then crowned himself Napoleon III. So they didn't decide. We've got a president. Let's make him emperor. He basically did it himself. He purged all the Republicans out of the French Parliament. And
it's quite a weird situation in a way. Do you know what I mean? He's sort of like. In these situations, especially in the 19th century, you kind of think of rural France as being like, oh look at the news. This has happened in Paris. Like literally, the effect on your life would be like zero, I'd imagine. Until he got drafted for a war, probably.
And then he suddenly comes back to haunt you in a real way.
Exactly.
But under Napoleon III, I think France is becoming increased. I think he seems to have almost staked his emperorship on this sort of premise that he's going to industrialise, modernise France to bring it into more alignment with Britain.
Do you think this is do you talk about the Saint-Simonian thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's and this is increasingly in Britain as well, and it's actually also in America, a brand of religious adherence, I suppose. It's not like it's not radical or anything like that, but the sort of essentially Christianity that's that quite a lot of rulers and officials and people who are sort of high bourgeois, sort of high society type people are interested in, which brings them. They believe that they're not only responsible for their own salvation, but in order for them to be saved, they must save everybody else. So that includes quite a lot of. I think this is partly one of the reasons why this trade deal was so readily welcome, because it was obviously going to improve the lives of people. And also why Saint-Simonians were so keen on doing quite a lot of the reforms that happened during Napoleon III's era. Do you want to?
I think that is exactly right on the right lines. I think as we see in Napoleon III's reign, especially in the early parts of it as well, he was investing in infrastructure,
Yeah.
transport,
Yeah. Yeah.
all in the aim to basically make France, fulfill its potential, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah.
So we've got this situation where you've got a British country and Parliament who are getting increasingly concerned and suspicious of this sort of resurgent France. People like Palmerston, who was the Prime Minister at the time, were around during the Napoleonic Wars, could remember the times when the continent was basically riven by French and British mutual hate and violence.
Yeah,
and so at the other hand, you've got France, which is it's obviously not going to just sit there and be happy to be number 2, number 3 power in Europe. It's going to want to
be back.
drive on. And so basically be back. And then you get these heated debates in Parliament about some MPs are wanting to spend lots of money on new ships, new cannon, new defences, and you get other MPs who are now starting to take a different view.
Yeah, such as John Bright. Who he was more interested in saying. I think what was it he exactly said? He was more interested in why. I think there was there was some kind of budget surplus, I think, at the time, and Gladstone was another person who was not keen on.
Yeah, he's the Chancellor all the time, wasn't he?
It's interesting because there's a very interesting. There's this good contrast here between sort of the American situation and the French situation at this time, where they see it as, and also you can sort of almost bring it into nowadays, where you see extra money for the government is seen as a good thing because then the government can spend more money on people. But in Britain at this time, it's considered to be a bad thing because it's sort of, what's the government going to do with it? It's going to stop our liberty kind of thing, which is quite interesting. This is quite an it's quite an unusual angle nowadays, but back then it was sort of seen as quite normal. So Gladstone and obviously John Bright as well were quite keen that actually maybe we should, the tariffs are bringing in loads of money, so we don't really need them. They're bringing in almost too much money. They are creating an artificial barrier essentially to people bringing products into the country, and you can see that by the vast amount of money that we're bringing in taxes, basically.
Yeah. So
does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Do you just want to quickly outline what a tariff is for anyone who?
A tariff is essentially if you're going to move something from France to England, for example, you would have to pay an import tariff, which is essentially an extra tax on the price of the good, or on the value of the good, I suppose. I suppose it would be like an independent value of the good, isn't it? Which then goes to the government.
So basically you're paying them for the privilege of selling something in their country.
Indeed, yeah. And this has the effect of raising the price of the import so it can't compete with domestic or English farmers, essentially, in this case.
People will often say it protects the national workers, which is why people who favour tariffs often call protectionism.
Indeed,
And Bright and his sort of faction, John Bright, who's an MP from Birmingham, were very much seen as free traders. Free traders, they're the absolute opposite of protectionism. It's where you basically eradicate the tariffs and make sure that goods can flow more freely.
And the whole idea is that you allow the people, the population. I mean, this is obviously going into the realm of economics now, but it's called I believe it's Ricardo's law of comparative advantage. I think it was. But anyway, don't quote me on that. But essentially, the point is if we're talking about England or British consumers have access to the lowest possible price for whatever good they want. So they are that much richer, even if it includes an import. The obvious downside is that domestic or British producers of that same good are likely to either go out of business or have to get very competitive in order to compete on the price to survive. Which we will bring on to in a minute, but essentially later on led to the destruction of almost complete destruction of British agriculture, but its surgence in industry, because obviously all the workers from agriculture that were now unemployed presumably just went straight into factories and stuff, which people have different views on this, but I think this is a good thing because they were now not reliant on the land, but reliant on their own hard work in the factory.
See, listeners, he said it would get interesting, and it did.
But see, this is why this is so interesting, because this debate still rages now.
Oh no, definitely, and as we've seen from our own experiences, trade deals are seemingly a lot harder to come by nowadays.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, we've got John Bright who stands up in Parliament and starts saying, why don't we have a trade deal with France, and let's bring ourselves close together rather than basically building up ourselves to fight them at some later unspecified date. And so what happens from that? Did France take notice?
Yes. One of Napoleon III's advisors, Chevalier. I can't remember his first name. Michel Chevalier. Who was a big believer in Saint-Simonian sort of philosophy, and he thought, what a fantastic idea! I'll contact not the MP who made the speech, but Richard Cobden. Richard Cobden, who was famously of the Anti-Corn Law League, another quite earlier. We might cover this in a different episode, but essentially Cobden spearheaded the Anti-Corn Law League, which was the removal of tariffs on corn or agricultural products being imported to England earlier in the century.
Yeah.
So he had a history basically.
He did. He said Bright was also involved in that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Right. That makes sense.
I think they were like friends, but I mean, it's still.
But
it's rather unclear as to why he decided that Cobden was the man to go to rather than the man who made the speech. But well,
maybe he's the ringleader.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just thought he was above contacting a normal MD. It's Cobden then.
I think Cobden was an MD.
Okay, well that makes sense then.
I'm pretty sure at one point I think Parson offered him a post in the Ministry of the Department of Trade, Board of Trade, and he refused it. Because he wants to be a sort of swashbuckling backbencher type. So now, the French have offered to listen to these ideas, and then I think Cobden basically went of his own accord. He wasn't allowed to, the British government didn't say go over. They basically went as a private citizen, sort of on his own accord, raced over the channel and went to speak to the French ministers about this.
Yeah, and including Napoleon III, who had a very famous quote. Well, not very famous, but amusing, should we say? Yeah.
Go on. Well, the full quote is, when he spoke to me, he says, "I'm charmed and flattered by the idea of performing similar works in my country."
Yeah.
But
essentially, talking about tariff reform.
Yeah.
Actually, this is. I mean, it sounds like such an exciting topic, tariff reform.
As we'll be able to see, we get a joke out of it as well.
Go on.
So, I'm charmed and flattered by the idea of performing similar works in my country, but it's very difficult in France to make reforms. We make revolutions in France, not reforms. So he was clearly a very witty man, as well as being a rather dictatorial ruler, Emperor Napoleon.
Do you think he sort of said something along those lines, but then whoever was writing down the minutes of the meeting decided that he'd insert their own comedy later?
Yeah. I think actually it kind of hints at something that's a bit darker in France at that time.
Yeah.
Rather than a joke, because
I think quite. Sorry.
The what's called the legislative corps, which is the lower house of the French Parliament, so basically the equivalent to House of Commons in France, was really virulently anti-tariff reform. They had voted down a number of.
They wanted protectionist tariffs.
They wanted protectionist tariffs. They voted down a couple of attempts to lower tariffs on products, and they were just totally against it. And so I think it kind of hints that Napoleon III is saying, okay, it would be great if we could, but it's going to be relatively difficult. I mean, I think in the end he quite liked the idea because it gave him an opportunity to basically completely circumvent the lower house, which I don't think he liked very much at all.
Yeah, because he could do that by he could do it by decree.
That's I think
as emperor. It's quite an odd situation that he as an emperor was sort of. Well, not subservient exactly, but he couldn't do this himself.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he could do it himself because it was a treaty. I think that was the reason, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a treaty. So that's how they did it. I think it was one of those things that he had basically managed to separate the legislative corps from making many decisions, but they still had quite a big voice in actually a lot of different things. So they had to work around them rather than through them.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a lot of bad feeling because things like senators, which the upper house were elected for life as well.
Oh, wow.
So, and then they became kind of almost his creatures.
But then that was his whole idea. That was the whole deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as emperor,
plus also, I think if you think about just building on a point I thought you were going to make, but actually didn't in the end. In the part of the because France at this point has had about obviously you had the original French Revolution, the 1830 revolution, when the restored Bourbons after the original Napoleon were overthrown in favour of Louis Philippe of the Orleanist monarchy. That was
kind of a sub-branch of the
exactly it's like the B team basically. So that's two revolutions, and then the third revolution was when in 1848 they were overthrown. So I think there might have been a bit of paranoia about maybe if we
and of course Napoleon
treat...
himself seized power essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, anything could happen.
It could, and I think it's quite interesting. Just again going back to that point there.
Yeah.
One of my favourite quotes that I read whilst researching this episode is Palmerston on the 1848 sort of arrangement that they put in place.
Oh yeah.
He did not like it.
Well, in France.
In France, yeah. He called it day before yesterday tomfoolery.
What does that mean?
I think it just means it's a load of rubbish and kind of a bunch of overexcited people coming up with an idea. And he didn't particularly backslide it when Napoleon III came in. At least behind closed doors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a slight digression, but when in 1848, I think they actually elected like the world's first socialist government or something in France.
Really?
Yeah, it was like, and they immediately did this. I can't remember what they did. It was something slightly bizarre. Like they started a public works program which built hills. and then demolished them again or something. And that was
just keep people in employment.
Yeah, literally. That was literally the reason. And I can't remember what some other things that they did, which obviously led to this was obviously all in Napoleon's favour when it came to the next election. But
save the ministry for hills for a later
episode. Absolutely.
But yeah, so what? So we've got this sort of negotiations taking place now between Cobden, sort of. At least tacitly backed by Britain at this point now. And the French government in the form of Napoleon and Chevalier and his other ministers. Do you have any sort of feeling about how this was greeted in Britain itself at the time, or France?
Well, like I said, in Britain, most of the political class, especially, obviously Gladstone not keen on having a budget surplus because it's like, oh my god, what are we going to do with this? And obviously Gladstone being quite free tradey as well. He's the original liberal, I think. Not the original liberal, but one of them.
It's got a nice ring to it.
Yeah, he was. Oh no, we actually mentioned this off air, didn't we? But let's just quick recap on Gladstone. I think so. Gladstone is famously heavily religious individual. If obviously he's not Saint-Simonian because he's not French, but he's quite he's quite Christian. So he's in this moral zone of where he should be, because he's in politics. He should use his political power for the betterment of everybody, for the saving of everybody, salvation of everybody. So he used to famously, we should tell the prostitute story, which is where he would find prostitutes and try and convince them to not be prostitutes anymore. But anyway, so essentially he was sort of very much in favour of, I get the impression that although there were quite a lot of vested interests in keeping certain tariffs in place, he was quite keen on removing them for the betterment of the English population, British population generally.
Yeah. So you could say that maybe.
And sorry, he was also quite keen on sort of home rule for Ireland later on as well, wasn't he? So it all fits together.
So you could say in some ways the elites in many ways in Britain, or at least the politically engaged masses, were quite behind this.
I think so. I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it? Because quite a lot of these sources are very much like written by people who are like, "Hooray! Look at this! This was a great achievement of ours." Yeah. Nobody even tried to oppose us.
There's a good speech I was reading back through the Hansard for these debates, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
And there's a good speech in the House of Lords made just after the treaty was signed, and he was saying that the news of the treaty has been greeted with is basically universal force throughout the country, from the Tyne down to the
infants wept.
Exactly. Basically, it gets to that level of hysteria.
Yeah, which I think obviously obscures the real. I mean, I'm economically speaking, I generally agree with this, and I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I think it's like for what it's worth. Economically speaking, this was a good idea. Yeah. But I suspect. There were some manufacturers and some like farmers and stuff would be a little bit disconcerted.
Yeah. Well, I think absolutely in France that's definitely the impression you get. They were very split. In terms
well, you
of
say split. I mean, the whole Parliament was against it.
Yeah, the whole Parliament was. Well, the lower house was definitely against it.
Yeah.
And then when you looked into the country on a more wider scale, people, basically wine merchants, were in favour of it.
Yeah.
Because even then, British people like to drink.
Yeah.
And also, people involved in rail, ports, and shipping were also quite in favour of it.
Yeah.
Because obviously, they're people getting the goods to places. So they'll be in favour of it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, people like textile manufacturers, cereal growers, and people who worked in the mining industry were pretty hard line against it in France.
Yeah.
And you did actually get scenes where you had 400 of France's leading businessmen travelling to Paris to basically protest in person against Napoleon III signing this treaty.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think in France definitely there's quite a lot of recorded evidence that people were quite unhappy about this. This move anyway. That even though Napoleon III eventually got behind it and was quite in favour of it, and as did his court and his advisors, they were still outside quite a bit of bad feeling about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
But in Britain, do you have any? I mean, is there anything in Britain?
In Britain, after it's signed, so when they're debating, basically when Palmerston comes into the House and says, the treaty's been signed, or ironically he says it's been signed, but I believe there's been a mistake on it, so it's being redrafted, it's being signed again. Which is amusing in the days before computers and stuff. You'd have to wait a whole day for it to do it.
And maybe it was a mistranslation or something.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a small minor thing, but they basically had to redo the whole thing. And then but there's
catastrophic effects on industry otherwise.
You do get a couple of people speaking out against it that I saw anyway. There's quite a few people speaking in the debate, but a few do speak out. Some people call it something like unlooked for and unwanted treaty. Other people are one MP in particular was quite worried by the fact that there's a treaty being used in this. He thought it should be more of a mutual thing where one country would lower tariffs and the other country would see the example and follow it rather than basically forcing countries to follow each other. That was his.
That's an interesting viewpoint because one could use that as a. Even nowadays, you could sort of say that about the European Union. But anyway, let's not go there. But you see what I mean. Because ironically, if you're, I mean, there is an argument to be made that if you, this is going into economics again, but there is an argument to be made that if you are, although there is this perception that tit for tat tariff wars are somehow going to help each other, they're not. They lead to less prosperity because there's less.
You're going to harm yourself.
There's less activity, basically. Less economic activity is available to you. So even if you were the one who lowered your tariffs, and England was wanting to lower their tariffs and France kept theirs up, in a way, there is still sort of an advantage in the sense that British consumers still do have access to.
Yeah, I mean, it would stimulate certain elements of the... obviously it would harm producers in
Britain.
But they'd trying to get into France, but it would help in other ways because there'd be a bigger flow of goods coming across.
Plus, if British producers did survive, they must be pretty robust. You know what I mean?
That's true.
If they could survive that, they'll survive anything.
Well, as the old Napoleon said, we're a nation of shopkeepers.
Indeed, yeah.
I think if anyone could, it's us.
Well, this is interesting because this is absolutely the period where Britain is like the powerhouse of. Whatever, but the
workshop of the world.
Workshop of the world. I think Birmingham actually was the workshop of the world. Yeah.
John Bright stomping ground.
Indeed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is so appropriate, isn't it?
But anyway, so we've got the treaty has been signed now over the despite certain MPs, certain French businessmen, other elements disliking it. The people who counted liked it. So it went through.
People who were in charge.
Interesting something about that. One of the people who was present at the signing was obviously the British ambassador to France. At the time, he was a man called Lord Cowley, and he was the nephew of Wellington. So you've got the nephew of Napoleon. You've got the nephew of Napoleon signing it for France, nephew of Wellington on the other side for Britain. So the two old enemies come together.
I think that's quite neat, actually. Right up until the First World War. But I think we should. So what do you want to speculate on the after effects? Should we?
If you want to. Have you got any? I've got a few, but if you want to lead off on that.
Well, the key one is as we talked about off air just now. I think they call it the Great Agricultural Depression. Essentially, in 1860, Britain was shielded from the effects of this. One of the things that some historians are pointing out is that basically tariffs, especially on agriculture, between Britain and France, don't make much difference because they're so close geographically that the weather will affect both of them the same. So if they have a bad harvest in Britain, you're not going to be able to import from France because they have a bad harvest in France as well. Anyway, so the Great Agricultural Depression, the effects of tariff reform on Britain is shielded from these for quite a while because, first of all, there's the Crimean War in Russia prevents Russia from exporting. Obviously, this was before
Yeah, but I mean, the artifacts would probably still have been felt in that, there would probably be some ill feeling towards Russia and that, we just fought a bloody war against them in the last decade. We're not going to want to buy your stuff.
Well, exactly. And then the other one, which is actually one of the more important ones, is America was too busy fighting its own civil war to start exporting anything to Britain until the mid-1860s at least.
1865.
And then, from that point on, and I've looked at some of the data as well, the prices of agricultural products like wheat and barley and oats and stuff just absolutely go through the floor. It's just unbelievable, like, how cheap everything is. Like, obviously, if you're a farmer, this is obviously really bad news, and this is why it's called the Great Agricultural Slump, because quite a lot of British farmers went out of business. But the point is, and this coincides with almost like one of the sort of highest periods of growth, I think, like possibly in Britain's history. The average person doesn't have to spend the entire year's wages on getting his family fed anymore. They can do it on just half or something. But the point is, then they can buy other stuff like consumer products like toys or wine or other stuff, which is then again generating more jobs in other areas, and it's just like everything becomes much more. The standard of living is raised.
I think this kind of plays into what you were saying at the very start, that this is the period where we start to see a move towards the modern, what we see as the modern world. So instead of working to basically, you drop down dead every day to basically just feed your family, you start to see this, people not living comfortably, but they're starting to get that kind of a bit more of enjoyment. Because this was the era when railways and stuff bring in the fact that people can actually go on a holiday or something like that, even just a day to the seaside or something like that. We were getting to that period where it's not an easy life, but it's getting to be have some glimmers of sunlight and enjoyment in it as well.
By the end of 1870, I think steamships and of course the ironclad ship, which obviously made travelling across the seas much more safe. All these things converged at the end of basically the 1860s, I think. This was signed in 1860, so it was almost like the door was open. Not a lot happened for quite a long time, and then all this stuff rushed in at the same time. So trade was much more connected. If you sent a ship across the water, I think this is one of my favourite facts of the 19th century. Before it was ironclad, there was like sort of 25% chance it would just never arrive. Like it would just sink on the way. And then by a fun thing that I found out on the way here was that in 1891, the very first cargo ships with reliable frozen chambers were invented.
Really? There you go.
Yeah. So anyway, this is quite. I think it's a really exciting. This is like a high 90s. This is like it.
I think also similarly to that element of it kind of like, because the treaty came in, it forced France to keep modernising.
Yes.
So it forced France to basically keep in Napoleon's plan, and it had to then keep pace with Britain in terms of what it was doing, what it was bringing out. It had to keep laying down tracks, making sure that goods could be moved from A to B, and that they were producing stuff to match what the British were producing, because it was so much easier to get in. And also interestingly, I read one theory that actually it helped with the sort of liberal reforms that were going on in France at the time, because Napoleon almost had to pacify the legislative corps.
Well, the middle classes are much more like, oh, why aren't we getting a say?
Absolutely. And then because the legislative corps had been so completely sidelined in this, they were quite annoyed about it, and the liberals within there were then clamouring more and more. So during Napoleon's reign, you get things like public libraries appearing, a greater range of subjects on the syllabus in France, and also more women's education as well. So you say, along with the economic improvement, they may have had a tangential effect on actual just liberalisation in France as well. I think it's quite interesting.
I think it's fascinating, because I mean, you could say that, what I was going to say was basically all of the French revolutions are essentially caused by famines, or starvation, people desperate for some kind of release, and that doesn't. I mean, apart from 1870, where that's a sort of a loss in a war against Prussia, which doesn't know where that fits. But there isn't really a major famine further on from that. Do you know what I mean? Like that's it. Like 1860, it's all over. There was the Siege of Paris in 1871, I think.
The Commune.
Yeah, but that's a bit different, isn't it?
It's different, but again, I think it's you've got the living conditions and the general horror of having. So I imagine food wasn't exactly easy to come by when the Prussians had managed to rampage all the way to Paris. So I think it does play into what you were just saying about not just famine but absence of food and
Yeah.
general living
Conditions being
conditions.
standards being better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's essentially the process of getting food is much more. It's much less. The process of growing and producing and getting food to people is so much more efficient that less people need to be doing it. Essentially,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, yeah,
less people are feeding themselves. It's more they go to a shop and buy some food from somebody else. Yeah.
Okay. And also probably I think one of the last bits in terms of the impacts is the fact that free trade didn't really stop here at this time.
Yeah.
It was it then rolled out further and further to other countries, and they more and more brought into it. So it's kind of like a rolling thunder.
The fashion.
Exactly.
The
Fashion
of the
times.
times.
They seem one.
Everyone's a free trader now.
Well, exactly. It rolls out across the
Up
continent.
until
really.
1892.
Yeah. And then 1892 is when.
Perhaps, should we? Unless you want to add anything, should we go on to the end of the free trade era?
That's what I was leading into. In 1892, France bring what's called the Malines Tariff.
Yeah.
Which basically ends the Cobden
The
Chevalier.
golden years of the free trade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think also, exactly the heady days of the 1870s. I think British governments were at least sort of standing on manifestos that were more like, we should have free trade with the empire. What's all this nonsense about free trade with the world? We should be protecting our own. And increasingly protectionist sort of murmurings from across different areas of the world, I think.
Yeah, I think that, and again, I think it also plays into this. From 1892, we're almost 20 years shy of the First World War, really, aren't we? So I think that builds back into the fact that as people become more protectionist, as we spoke about earlier, they're becoming more suspicious.
Yeah,
so we get that
absolutely.
Almost a replay of what happened in the 1850s, late 1850s, where countries were then starting to look at each other with more kind of like what are they up to? Then obviously we lead into in the early 1900s the naval arms race between Britain and Germany this time rather than Britain and France. Yeah. So I think it's almost like a case of history repeating itself once the free trade starts disappearing, as does the goodwill in many cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, commerce brings people together. Literally. I think that's it's a very important point.
One, I think, before we go into further reading, I think nice footnote to add to this footnote of history. And that's that. So Cobden died quite shortly after the treaty was signed in 1865. So just 5 years after it went. I think some people were saying that the exertions of it, and the stress, contributed to his physical state going downhill. And so 3 years after he died, there was a statue of him erected in Camden. It's now outside the Mornington Crescent tube station.
Oh, really? Yeah. Nobody knows who he is.
I know, exactly. I think I might have to go and have a wander down there to look at it.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the statue is paid for by public subscription, and the inscription on it notes that the key and sort of principal contributor was actually Napoleon III. So in memory of his work on the Cobden Chevalier treaty. So and it's quite a nice sort of touching memory to him, in the fact that clearly he did make an impact on Napoleon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I'm pretty sure he was basically responsible for. Otherwise, you can think of the 1830s and how horrific. Obviously in France they're pretty bad because of various revolutions during these periods. But it wasn't great in Britain either.
No,
it's like you can sort of imagine it just going on and on. But I'm actually firmly of the belief that actually Cobden Chevalier and also the anti-corn law, getting rid of the corn laws, actually sort of pushed them, pushed it up to another level for civilization, basically.
That's Cobden Chevalier, and then ending in a nice inscription.
Indeed.
From Napoleon III. I was trying to wrap my mind and thinking if there were many other British citizens who had a foreign monarch paying the largest portion of their statue being erected.
Really?
So I was trying to think if there were any others, but I can't think of any.
No, I
imagine we'd have to go around every statue in London to figure that out. Yeah. But anyway. That was quite a nice sentiment to end on. Yeah. Do you have any further reading?
Yes, I have. I have plenty of further reading, actually. The very best source on this is by A.L. Dunham, The Anglo-French Treaty of Commerce in 1860 and the Progress of the Industrial Revolution in France.
Nice.
Which I think is actually more of obviously it's completely focused on the on the treaty itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a journal article.
Okay.
So it's actually it's a short piece, but it's precise.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of others. The Life of Richard Cobden.
Nice. Yeah.
Free trader to the end, and
it's not the title of the book.
No. It's just called The Life of Richard Cobden by John Morley.
Okay.
And Sir Llewellyn Woodward's The Age of Reform, which is quite a heavy tome. Because I remember reading this back in university, but covers the period from about 1815 to about 1870. So only some focus on this, but still.
It could do the wider time as well, I imagine.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. It would be interesting to see the build up to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
Do you have any others?
I have a couple. Nicholas, one of my favourite types of books. Yes, read Nicholas is a great book, but not specifically for this. I don't think you'll find much in there about it. But you might be disappointed. Nicholas Edsill, Richard Cobden, Independent Radical, which I quite like that.
Yeah.
There's also multiple biographies of Palmerston. But I think if I had to choose someone to have dinner with, it would probably be Palmerston. One of them would be Palmerston, because he seems like such a witty guy.
Yeah,
really. So amusing. I imagine quite a few funny stories. Anyway, quite a few on Palmerston to read, biographies, articles, that type of thing. Same with Napoleon III.
Yeah.
Also, if you want to...
Gladstone as well.
Gladstone also. There's also the... if you go online, go to the Hansard website, you can look at all of the parliamentary debates around this.
Yeah.
Which make quite interesting reading.
I think it's a really important... can you read the original treaty
you can
as well?
Somewhere? I imagine there'll be a treanscript somewhere. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think it's held actually in the British Library now.
Okay.
From memory, it's being held in there, but I don't think it's on display.
Yeah.
I think the British Library do have at least the British copy.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Footnotes of History. For more episodes, visit footnotesofhistory.com and subscribe. Or, if you want to suggest an episode to us, email us on episodes@footnotesofhistory.com. You can also follow us on social media @FOH Podcast for Twitter, and we're also on Instagram and YouTube. Thanks for listening.